Hey everybody, welcome to the Smart Life Club. This is the Coffee Break Show and I am Vickie Helm. Welcome. I'm so glad and excited that you're here today. It's Tuesday. And you know, it's interesting. I'm in Colorado. That's where I am at right now. And we have snow this morning and it's May. And I'm like, when does spring happen? We had spring, we had a few flowers, and we had a dumping of snow. And evidently in this state, it's very common for that to happen. So I don't know where you are, but I am looking forward to spring so badly. I love the flowers of spring. I'm looking forward to summer, and I'm so happy that you're here today. One of the things I want to talk about is triggers. And triggers are an interesting thing because triggers can just put you in a state that's happy, or they can trigger you into a state of negativity. And somebody can come by and boom, you're triggered by their presence. That trigger can make it happy or sad or uncertain or nervous or something. Hey everybody, nice to see you hopping on board. Glad to see you're here. Thank you. So when we're talking about triggers, it's interesting because triggers are things that we make up in our mind about what something means or what someone does, whether they're doing something on purpose or not. Triggers are everywhere, and you can get triggered very easily, but you can be triggered in a good way or a not quite so good way. The issue with the trigger is that we always think the trigger is something outside of ourselves. We think somebody caused this feeling inside of us, whether it's anger or sadness or happiness or whatever else. A trigger is not something that someone does that reminds us that's what it does. It reminds us of the past. A trigger is something that is where your mind is rolling in the past going, I've seen that before. I've seen that behavior before. And we trigger a response in ourselves. We trigger something like, I don't know, somebody tells a joke and we laugh. That's a trigger because you know it's a joke. You know the punchline is coming. They're like, I have a joke to tell you. And you're waiting for the laugh part to come on. That's a trigger. But also when somebody says something and maybe we take the way they say something wrong, then we're equally as triggered. Then we're like, can you believe they said that? Can you do this? Blah, blah, blah. But the entire time we're being triggered, we are not responsible for ourselves. We have a tendency to think they triggered me. And that's not true. You triggered you. And that's the thing that we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about good triggers and not quite so good triggers. We're going to talk about pleasant and unpleasant triggers. But the key thing is you have to have boundaries. And the thing is, we don't just have to have boundaries around what somebody else is doing. We need to have boundaries about what we're doing, about how we're acting, about how we're responding. And that's the work, isn't it? That's the real work when you get to the point where you're like, okay, they said that, but it doesn't mean what it means in the past. It doesn't mean the same thing over here. And are you open enough to find out what they do mean? So I know a lot of people are going to want to argue with me here and go, no, it's really them. Triggers are when people trigger you. No. Triggers are when you say something in your mind that you believe is true and you thrust it on another person. And I'm going to use, myself as the example because there are so many times when I think something that, say, my partner or a friend has said that they meant in a flippant tone. And they're not even being flippant. They're just, or they've said even something kind. And I've responded in a way that, what do you mean? And they're trying to compliment me and I can't even hear the compliment. That's when you're triggered. Now, when you have triggers in yourself, when you have triggers, let's just take the words trigger and name it what it really is. It's an over response. It's a form of defensiveness when you're triggered by something. When you have a trigger, you have a lack of awareness of what you're actually saying to yourself. You think they've said it to you. And in that nanosecond, if you could slow your mind down, you realize you have looked at their actions, evaluated it, and judged it as what this thing is. And what happens is, if you're not, and you don't have a boundary around you, you will take that thing and call it the truth, and you will not let go of it. You'll try to force them to say what it is. This trigger is true. You did it on purpose. You're trying to hurt me. You're trying to make it blah, blah, blah. Or did you see that person? You don't think you can blah, blah, blah. And somehow you start the story in your head. You make that trigger worse than it is. And then there are the other triggers. Other triggers like, let's say your partner comes home and says, guess what? I have a surprise for you. That's a good trigger. You're like, I love surprises. Or maybe you don't. And they come home and you're like, what's the surprise? And they're like, we're going on vacation. Maybe you're going to Hawaii or Orlando, Florida or something. And then the trigger is like, yay! But still in that moment, you need to be responsible for yourself. It is not what he said to you. It is the meaning you gave to what he said. Your brain is like, it's going to be fun. We're going to have fun. It's going to be great. We're going to have a great time. And suddenly the rest of you is following along. You're like, wow, it's going to be great. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a great time because of the story you've told your mind. And it's the same in reverse. When the trigger is something that makes you angry, it's the same instance where you have said to yourself, you're not doing this, or you're lying, or you're this, or you're that, and I'm tired, and da-da-da. It's all the story that you're telling yourself. It doesn't have anything to do with the present moment. So when triggers happen, how can we bring ourselves back to center? Because what do you lose when you're triggered? What do you lose? You lose a boatload of capabilities. But the most important thing you lose is discernment. You lose your ability to have that gut check. You're all up in your mind talking about what it is that you think you saw, that you think you heard, that you thought, whatever it is. Triggers are both positive and negative. But the thing about the trigger is there's no such thing as a trigger. A trigger could be just plain and simple. The meaning you gave to something, the meaning I gave it. It must mean this or it must mean that. And yesterday we talked about a point where I had told myself something bad about what's happening. And when I do tell myself something bad, thank you for all the likes and the loves, everybody. I love seeing that. It makes my day. Do more of them. Yes, please. Thank you. Barb says psychological triggers have a huge impact, good or bad. That's right, they do. And remember yesterday we talked about your thoughts could either impair you or empower you. That's it. They either impair you or empower you. And triggers are sneaky words that I don't like to use the word trigger, because when you use the word trigger, it's almost like you're blaming someone else. So to me, I like to use the word or the sentence. I say, what I said to myself in this moment, I don't even know if it's true or not. Is that you said that in a sarcastic tone. Is that true? I mean, I want to be open enough to hear that person, because you have no idea how many times I have diagnosed the situation incorrectly and thought to myself, I'm never wrong. I'm always right. When that's not true either. And so I had to catch myself and be like, Vickie, can you stay here for a moment, listen to someone else for just a minute? And you would not believe how much of our life we lead by how we think, how we're triggered, and we just react all day long. And when we shift our focus, we have to command our focus, right? And so when you get triggers, when you get those triggers, whether they're pleasant or not, they only have two things they can do. They can either empower you or impair you. That's it. And when we get to the point where we want to be self-responsible, where we want to have some boundaries around how we act to others, because if you're triggered and you don't have boundaries, you become a bully. You turn around and you bully the partner that you're with or the person that you're with, and you bully them with a negative comment or an argumentative comment or something that you're accusing them of constantly, because the accusation is right here. But what if we just, how can we stop this for a moment? Because the second you force yourself to stop, you have made one of the most empowering leaps in consciousness you could ever make. You empower yourself to discern. Now, one of the things that was really great with the wisdom of Solomon, Solomon being the King of Solomon in the Bible, is that he had a lot of discernment. He'd hear himself and evaluate in a way where it wasn't emotionalism, where it was thoughtful. And when we have an emotionalism attached to a trigger, our ego wants to be right more than it wants to find the truth. And I want you to hear that again. When you're triggered and there's emotionalism, your ego wants to jump in and it would rather be right than hear the truth. But the only way out of the trigger really is to know the truth, to become the truth, to settle into the truth. And if you cannot settle into the truth, you cannot have success or move forward, period. You're only fooling yourself. Truth is the flatline place between success and failure. Success and failure. Thank you, everybody. It's so important to have those two things. And when we're triggered, we don't have the truth. We have an opinion about what we think is the truth. Now, there's a difference between a trigger and a gut check. Now, there are some times where you have a gut feeling, and right away, that gut feeling, when it comes in, it says, don't go on that. Get out of this room. Get away from that man. That person's dangerous. And sometimes there's not even a story. So the other day, Robin has the dogs and they're hiking. And for some reason, our dog, who is brave as all get out and loves to be outside, is running through the trees and everything else. And then all of a sudden, she gets a feeling, and it's an uncomfortable feeling. And she comes right back over to Robin, turns around and starts walking with her like this. And then all of a sudden, Robin realized something ain't right. Something's not good. She couldn't see what it was. It was dark and there's trees, but the dog was like, we're turning around right now. And Robin listened to the dog. She was like, okay, we're turning around right now. I don't have to know what the danger is. I know I have to read the sign, read the signal. Now, she could have been triggered and said, oh, you're so full of it. Come on, let's go. We don't know if it was a mountain lion, a bear, a crazy serial killer. Who knows what it was? But the point is, if you're triggered, you can't read the roadmap. You can't see the roadmap. In fact, you think your ego is the creator of the roadmap and it should go your way. When you're triggered and you're unwilling to listen or hear, you're in a negatively triggered, not positively triggered, but negatively triggered. Your ego sabotages everything that's there. Now, when you're positively triggered, and you're like, yay, we're going on vacation, and it's in your mind, you create expectation, and you can't be present in the moment. Your expectation that it's gonna be fun, it's gonna be this, it's gonna be that, it's gonna be the other, it's gonna takes you out of the moment when you're there. You don't know if your vacation is gonna have bad weather and rain the whole time you're there. You don't know if it's going to be perfect or sunny. What you do is imagine what it's going to be like. I imagine it's going to be this. I imagine it's going to be that. And the thing about the imagination is you're no longer in the present moment. You're still in your trigger. You're still in what you're telling yourself. You're not even present with what's going to happen. So when you have an experience of something and you're looking at being fully present and fully engaged, then you have all these other faculties that are with you that are, you don't even know how great they are. They bring success, they do this. But I will tell you this, when you drop the triggers and you stay in the moment, something really amazing happens. What happens is you get guidance, and it tells you what to do. It tells you where to go. It actually helps you go say, I'm going to go do this, or I think it's going to go this way. This is how you find purpose. It's how you find your calling. It's called listening inward. But when we are literally trapped by our triggers, whether you're blaming something or anticipating something or creating expectation, if you create expectation or if you blame something, your ego is so far in the way, you're either creating anger or disappointment because things didn't go the way you wanted them to. Then you'll create force because I want to force them to go the way I want to, or I want to force them. And what that does, that force, it's depleting on your energy. It just depletes who you are. I want to go back over here because, man, you guys have been jabbering away. Hey, Freddie, nice to see you on board. Hey, Barb, nice to see you. Karen, nice to see you. Suzanne, everyone. Let's see. What I said to myself in this moment, I'm not sure it is true or not. Yes. The Smart Life Club says love that strategy. So simple yet powerful. Thank you. Karen says when we are triggered, we don't have the truth. We have what we think is the truth. And that's the thing. We don't often like to challenge what we believe because we believe so strongly that we see everything perfectly. We think our mind sees everything just, it's so perfect the way I see it. There is nobody that can see it better than me, and we become a control freak. And we negate everything else that's great and or dangerous, because there's both, but mostly the greatness away from us. How can we be present and create solution and connection? Hey, Lori, nice to see you. Barb says, vital that the level of our voice matches our message, as we can often trigger others just by the volume of the delivery. That is so true. And you know what, Barb? I get that a lot. When I get animated, or I get really excited, or I'm scared, I raise my voice. And the people listening to me are like, she's yelling at us, chill out. Or, Vic, calm down. But really, I'm so excited. But one of my biggest triggers is fear. And when I'm afraid of something, I'm like, oh my God, I just get louder. That's so true. And when you want to actually have some gentleness, the trigger can actually die down. You can hear yourself, but you have to monitor yourself in that way. You got to know who you are. You got to know what triggers you, how to trigger it, etc. Yes, anger. Yes, and anger is unrealized expectations. That's correct. Anger is unrealized expectations. Suzanne says triggers can create false reality. Oh, you got that right. And egos love false realities. Oh, you got that right too. Our egos love to lie to ourselves. Yes, humility is the best way to stay aware to our triggers. Yes, I want to repeat this. This is so good. Suzanne says triggers can create false reality, and egos love false reality. Our egos love to lie to ourselves. Humility is the best way to stay aware of our triggers. Yes, Suzanne, excellent. Smart says, bam, that is so true. Got to send this to my husband. Barb says, I have found meditation to be a tremendous blessing. Yes, this is the power of meditation and why I do it every morning. Because awareness of the self is the most important boundary we need to have. The boundary that helps us relate and protect with each other. When you make a request from someone, and if they're triggered, like if you make a request of someone, please don't do this, or please do this, or please don't do that, and they're offended, that's them, that's their trigger. Whatever they're telling themselves, they're telling themselves. And so there's no other way for you to, talk to yourself other than being aware. And meditation is one of the best tools. It brings a lot more calm, and it brings a lot more center. But it also makes you aware of what you're thinking and when you're thinking. Because, it's like you have to catch yourself in the moment. It's one thing to talk about it, but when you're triggered, it's another thing to talk about it. It's like when you're triggered, can you stop yourself? Just like that, and just say, you know what? I want to manage my ego. That's what I want to manage. When you're triggered, can you just say to someone, you know what? this isn't how we talk to each other. We talk to each other more kindly. And I want to stop right now and just take a minute and ask us to breathe together, because I love you, or you're my friend, or this isn't the communication I want to have with you. I like you. I like being around you. Be vulnerable and tell someone, this isn't how I want to talk with you. And the reason you want to say that is because that's the truth. Most people that you're triggered by, you have connection to. I know that when I'm triggered by my spouse, it's because I have connection to them. If you don't have connection and you're triggered by them, you're judging something they're doing. You're judging them like they shouldn't be or they should be. But when you're triggered by something that close, I always tell someone the kind of connection I want to have with them. I would like to have fun connection, or a conversation that is lovely and kind. But the bravery of being able to tell someone, this is not the kind of connection I want to have with you, that's a big deal. That when you're like, this is not the kind of connection I want to have with you, you're now creating what you want with them, because you get to say what I do want. I want you to know that I love you. I like you. I don't even want to argue with you, because chances are they don't like it with you either. They love you and they want to have balance with you. They want to be in connection with you. And your minds have run off with your ego. And the second you both say, yeah, I don't want this either, bam, you drop that ego and you can come back to that center, that calm, and say, okay, what do we want? And you can obviously say something like, I was scared, and for some reason I was telling myself that you were, is that true? Find out what the truth is. Listen with an open heart. Smart says, thank you, Suzanne. This is the truth. Awareness of ourselves is the most important boundary we can have. That's right. Awareness of ourselves is the most important boundary we can have. And I want to thank you for displaying such courage at talking about this with me, because it's a hard conversation to be able to say. It's easy to look at someone else and go, you're triggered, you're defensive, you're this. It's much harder to go, I'm triggered, I'm defensive, I need to stop. And the boundary is, when there's conflict, where do you help creating it? Where do you help create it? Find that point. Is it a trigger? What are you telling yourself? Are you empowering this conversation or impairing it with power struggle? What are you doing? And that awareness will bring you more success. Tomorrow it'll be 9 o'clock on the West Coast, noon o'clock on the East Coast, and 10 Mountain Standard Time. Thank you for joining me today. I value you all more than you ever know. Mwah! Talk to you tomorrow. Bye.